as a single safety, has a 5.6 average returning. From the 17-yard line here, starts left-footed kick, end over end, wobbly upfield, grabbed by McDuffie at the 30, into the middle he goes, 35, hurdles a tackle at the 40, he gets a block, 50, 35, 40, down to the 35, to the 30, down to the 20, down to the 10, the 5, touchdown, and there are no flags. Oh my, Rick, what a beautiful play. O.J. McDuffie, the number 1 pick, we've been waiting to hear from him. The blocking set up perfectly for O.J. He read it.
And folks, that was just one of many great moments this gentleman gave us over the years. I knew right then and there we had something special as Miami Dolphin fans. He's one of my all-time favorite athletes. He's definitely my top 5 Miami Dolphins. He needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway. The great number 81, the one and only O.J. McDuffie. And O.J., I want to welcome you to the show today. This is a real honor for me.
Oh, Mike, thank you, man. I'm so glad I got that punt return right there, man, because when they said I had a 5.6-yard average before that, I really needed that long one right there to boost that average, right?
Yeah, definitely. And O.J., since that was the first clip we played, I wanted to ask you, and I asked Stephen Baker this a couple weeks ago when I had him on the show, how difficult is it to be back there catching a punt? Because you really don't have a lot of time to think. You just got to focus, but it's not easy when you got great athletes and hard hitters running for you.
Yeah, I think catching punts in football is probably the toughest thing to do, in my opinion. I think, for one, you have to have a little crazy in you because you've got your head up while everybody's coming down after you. You know what I mean? And that's a tough deal. But it's all about judgment, Mike. First of all, you do your research and obviously do scouting. You know how far the punter punts it, left foot or right foot. Right foot is obviously easier because we're used to that. Left foot's a different ball game. You use a jugs machine all week to get ready for a lefty punter because you can't simulate that in practice. The spin, the way the ball falls down. Punts are so strange because if it turns over, it's going to go a long way. If it doesn't, it's going to fall off a cliff. So you got to be ready for that. And then you got to judge the distance. So, air time, hang time, and then distance, whether you're going to fair catch it or you're going to try to return it is all, a variable. But also, if your team's going for the block, you have no help. So you might want to fair catch that one as well. So there's so many crazy things that go on with punt return, but it's one of the most exciting plays in football, in my opinion.
Right. So let me ask you, OJ. I mean, obviously you're a big Dolphins fan now, but when you were a kid, I mean, did you have an NFL team you really liked, a player you really emulated? I mean, how did the love for football begin for you?
Yeah, when I was really, really young, I was like most people, a Cowboys fan. I grew up in Central Ohio, and the Cowboys were on every single day, like everybody else. That's why they became America's team. Tony Dorsett was one of my favorite players. I was a running back growing up. I was named after O.J. Simpson, but I didn't really watch the Bills and because they weren't on like the Cowboys and Steelers and teams like that were on. But then I moved to Cleveland when I was 13, and I became a huge Browns fan, really big Browns fan because I'm always about loving the local teams. And the same way I'm in South Florida. I love every single local team in South Florida. But that was my team growing up. I had no idea when it came to the Dolphins. That was not my team. I knew who Dan Marino and those guys were, but that was not my team at all.
Right. And probably what a lot of people may not realize about you, OJ, is you were a 4-sport player in high school, and you were a very good baseball player. And if I remember correctly, you were drafted by the California Angels, and you even played a year or two at Penn State for baseball. So let me ask you, I mean, did you like one over the other when you were a kid, or was it strictly football?
Yeah, I started playing baseball first because I couldn't play football yet. Baseball was the first sport I was allowed to play. Soccer, I think, was at the same time. When you're 5 years old, there really was no football at that point. So you play a little t-ball, you play a little, I played a little soccer. There's a little basketball youth league, I think at like 6 or 7 years old until I was able to play football. But football was always my passion because my whole family, all my uncles, everybody played football. But in terms of like getting into an organized program, it took a little while to get going there. There were obviously other sports that started a little earlier than that. Baseball was definitely one of them.
Right. And you went to a school called Hawken School in high school, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And I think you still have the record for the longest interception return in high school football. I think it was 108 yards that you intercepted and ran it back. So, I mean, just talk about the time at Hawken because you had an outstanding career. I think you had over 7,000 total yards in your career, which is just unbelievable. So talk about Hawken High School a little bit.
Yeah, Hawken was great, man. I was just there. There's a kid there named DJ Dominic Johnson who's about to break my single season touchdown record. He tied it last week with 31, and now he's got like 2 more games left, so he's going to destroy it. So eventually, but just a great kid. But Hawken was tough, man. Hawken's a private school, east side of Cleveland, outside of Cleveland. And I was only there for my sophomore, junior, and senior year, so I amassed those yards and touchdowns, and just in 3 years there. But it was once I got used to it, it was great because you said I played 4 sports, and that was a hard thing to do in itself because you play football in the fall, basketball in the winter, but then the spring comes and I'm playing baseball, which is my number 1 sport, but I also ran some track,
Right?
Really just jumped. So what I would do is we'd have a doubleheader in baseball on a Saturday. And then I go between games and I go get some qualifying jumps in high jump and long jump. And then I go back and play the second game.
And a lot of people did that back then, but it's hard to believe that you could do that because you're trying to focus on a baseball game. Then you're trying to go out there and I'm sure part of you had to be thinking about the baseball game. I got to do this quick, get back to the game. So that's not an easy thing to do. But the fact that you were able to juggle both is just a testament to your athletic ability.
Man, and that's one thing about Ohio. We learned to play every single sport because at one point we had to go indoors, like I talked about with basketball. And then, in the spring, that's the only thing you had. There was no spring football. There was no other sport. Nowadays, there's year-round sports, but then you had to play, baseball or run track. And, I wanted to do both. And I wasn't really into the running part because it took too much training away from baseball. And I wasn't going to be as good as I needed to be on the track. But I knew I could jump. One thing I knew I was able to do was jump out the gym. I was, as a 5'9" kid, I was able to dunk real easy. I knew I could high jump. I knew I could long jump. And I mean, it's so funny. I went back and some guy was like, I can't believe you still have the high jump record here at 6'8", and I'm 5'10" and a half or maybe 5'10", and my highest high jump was 6'8". So it was just fun. Sports are my life. Sports are my family's life. And being able to balance all that with my academics was fun for me.
And let me ask you, OJ, because you obviously played every sport that was available to you. Winter was basketball, spring was track and baseball. And I think a lot of times nowadays, some kids focus too much on the one sport. Some will focus on baseball. This is why I believe these pitchers get hurt a lot because they're just pitching year round too much. Some will focus on football and some will just focus on basketball. Would you encourage most kids to play as many sports as they can when they're little and in high school?
Absolutely, for a number of reasons, because you develop different skills, skill sets when you're playing different sports. And I think that, I'll give you an example. My oldest son, Cameron, my oldest son, my youngest son is Cameron. My oldest son, Otis Jr., or JJ, we call him, he played baseball only for a long time. And he was just kind of an awkward kid, not very athletic, stumbled around a lot. Then we had him in basketball one winter, and it changed his whole life in terms of athleticism, coordination, everything about it. So I think that every single sport gives you a different, works different parts of your body, and it also works different parts of your athleticism. So I see some guys that play football that try to go out and play in a charity softball game, and it's totally embarrassing. I see some guys that try to go out and play basketball, and it's ugly. They can only play football. For me, I was able to play all these different sports, and then when we get to our older ages and we play some of these pickup games, I was able to, kind of excel in those situations. But I truly, truly encourage people to get out there and have their kids play multiple sports. One, because it gives you that athleticism and that well-rounded athleticism, but two, it also helps prevent burnout. And burnout's a big problem in a lot of sports.
Right, definitely. So let's talk about Penn State, OJ, and let me ask you, did you know right away that's where you wanted to go? Were you talking to a few schools? I mean, was there ever a thought about going to Ohio State, considering you were in Ohio? I mean, how did it come about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had 72 scholarship offers, full ride offers, coming out of high school. But it all started around my sophomore year at Hawken when our team was really good. We're getting a lot of notoriety and a lot of attention. And so I got the opportunity there to, I got a lot of letters. I got Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State. And growing up in Ohio, he talked about a Buckeye. Ohio State was definitely my number one. How I got out of state is another story because, Earl Bruce was the head coach when I was growing up, and he was amazing. And everybody in Ohio that played football in Ohio wanted to play for Earl Bruce. But then Earl Bruce got fired my senior year, December of my senior year, he got fired. They brought in John Cooper. My mom was not having it. She was not a big John Cooper fan. And so that put it, down to my 2 and 3. And 2 and 3 was Penn State and Notre Dame. She liked Notre Dame and Lou Holtz. I love Penn State and Joe Paterno, and that's why I went to Penn State.
Right. And think about this, OJ. I was thinking about this before you came on today. In your career, you played for 3 head coaches who you had Jimmy Johnson and Paterno, who won multiple national championships, and then Jimmy won 2 Super Bowls. Then you had Don Shula, who won 3 Super Bowls. So the first 3 big-time coaches you played for college and the NFL, these guys had such track records. That had to just be an unbelievable feeling for you coming into college and the NFL like that.
Yeah, definitely blessed to play for some great coaches, man. My first great coach, obviously, is my Uncle Homer, who taught me everything about all those 4 sports we talked about. I mean, he was on my butt so tough, Mike, man. I couldn't do any right. In high school, I could have a game where I have 200 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. And he said, well, you missed this block or you missed this tackle when I was playing on both sides of the ball. And he'd write all this down on the football program, from the game. And so we get in the car and I'm thinking oh man, I had a hell of a game. And he's like, nah, it wasn't as good as you thought. Here's what you need to work on. And then my high school coach, Cliff Walton, he should be in that echelon of those greats as well. I mean, he was just an incredible coach, incredible man, incredible mentor for me and a lot of the guys that I played with. But then I got to Joe, then I got Shula, and then I got Jimmy. So I've got all Hall of Famers in my life as coaches, man. So very blessed, and very few people have that resume.
Right. And think about this when you came to Penn State. Now, there weren't as many bowl games as there is now. And the 4 real big teams back then, and I mean, there were several, obviously, but you think about it, Miami, Notre Dame, Penn State, and Florida State. I mean, those teams were the cream of the crop. Then, of course, you had Nebraska. Alabama was getting good. So, I mean, you came at a time, though, where I really believe college football was getting more and more popular.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's obviously it's been around longer than the NFL has, and some of those programs you're talking about are the anchors to what's been going on, in the sports. And obviously Alabama way back in the day, Notre Dame way back in the day, Ohio State way back in the day, and Penn State. Penn State, I went there. They'd won the national championship in '82 and '86, and I went in '88. Obviously, we didn't win the championship, then, but they were one of the top teams in the country at that point. So. Yeah, man, college football is where football is the purest, in my opinion. You got a lot of guys out there that are fighting to get to the NFL, but to be honest, most of them aren't going to make it there. But they're fighting for that, the schools, and that's the fun stuff. The school and the team spirit is lively, and when it comes to college football, man, and in Penn State, it just exemplifies that. Notre Dame exemplifies that. A lot of people that root for Notre Dame never went there, though. That's the only difference. They crack me up how big Notre Dame fans they are, but they never step foot on campus because a lot of them grew up in Catholic schools. But for us, though, in the state of Ohio, there is no other school than Ohio State. When it comes to Pennsylvania, we battle with Pitt a lot of times, but I think we take a 70-30, majority when it comes to, the fandom in the state of Pennsylvania. But yeah, college football and college sports, man, in general, is it's unbelievable.
And think about this, OJ. You really set your mark at Penn State. I mean, you set the single-season career receiving records, all-purpose yards, and then, I mean, who could forget your big game in the '92 Fiesta Bowl? I mean, just off the charts against Tennessee, one of the great games ever. I mean, just talk about that run at Penn State, because maybe you didn't win a national title, but if I remember, OJ, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, I think the '91 Penn State team had a real down year, so you guys really came back in '92 and got Penn State back to respectability.
Yeah, my first year was awful at Penn State. I didn't play much as a freshman. I got hurt my sophomore year. The first game I was going to be starting, I started that game, and then the wheels kind of fell off for our team, and we weren't playing as well as we should have been playing. We had a hell of a recruiting class, and those guys were starting to come around. But then it kind of came up where, we came down here and we lost to Miami, and then we went back home and lost to Boston College, and it was kind of a failed season at that point. And so we're really looking to rebound after that. So one loss in college back then, it was it. There
Yeah,
was no
yeah,
conference, no conference championships, no chance to get into a BCS opportunity. So that was pretty much it. So you know how that is when you lose that one game, man. A lot of guys lost a lot of interest and lost a lot of focus. To be honest with you, but yeah. And then my last year was probably worse than my junior year because I think we lost 4 games that year, and they were ugly losses at that.
yeah.
We lost the bowl game and everything. But it was on me to just go out there and try to be the best player I could be, and hopefully get myself an opportunity to live a childhood dream, which is playing the NFL, which ended up working out for me.
Yeah, and OJ, I mean, you were probably too young to really appreciate it. You were a 21-year-old kid, but I mean, looking back, it has to be an unbelievable feeling to be an MVP in a big time bowl game, playing for Penn State, which, like I said, was one of the elite in college football. I mean, maybe when you were like 25, 26, you were able to really like be proud of it more so than when you were like 20, 21.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that I did. First of all, the Tennessee game was so much fun. Our bowl games that we went to were unbelievable. I mean, we went to the Holiday Bowl out in San Diego. We went to the Blockbuster twice down in Miami. We went to the Fiesta Bowl, obviously, in Phoenix. Those are some incredible bowl games that we went to. And that Fiesta Bowl, we thought we still had an outside shot at winning the national championship. If we beat them, was playing, I think, Alabama. I knew that one of those two would probably get the championship, but at the same time, it was worth fighting for. And Tennessee was talking so much trash all week long. So it really, really felt good to stump on them in that game. I think they got jumped out on us like 14-0. I think we ended up beating them, I don't know, 35-14 or something like that. And it was just one of those gratifying wins. And then when you could be a major part of it in the return game on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, that made it even more fun.
Right. So let's talk about the Dolphins. I mean, like I said, for me, watching you play as a Miami Dolphin fan, it was just unbelievable. Loved watching you play. And I think when you got there, OJ, I could be wrong, but I think Clayton, it might have been his last year, but he was still there at the time, correct? Or was
Clayton had just gotten traded.
he just got traded, so you
Yeah.
didn't get to play with him. But I believe was Urban Fryer there. I think he was probably
Yeah.
there at the
So,
time. Yep.
yeah. So that's how we got Urban Fryer. We traded Clayton to Green Bay
Yeah.
for a second-round pick. We used that second-round pick, and we traded with New England to get Urban Fryer.
Right. And Irvin Fryer, I mean, I was so heartbroken when the Dolphins let him go. I believe he went to the Eagles after that. Just a tremendous receiver. But think about that, your rookie season. I mean, talk about pressure, though, for you, because Dan Marino is obviously one of the greatest of all time, but he's going to yell at his players sometimes. He has to do that. And you're playing with him. You got Irvin Fryer. I think Keith Byers was still there. Then, of course, the great Don Shula. So, while it was an unbelievable experience and very exciting, it had to be nerve-wracking as a rookie playing with these type of people.
Man, these are the guys that you played in your dorm room with on Madden. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
and then you're all of a sudden you're in the same locker room on the same team with these guys. It was absolutely incredible to be in that locker room with those guys. And you talked about it, man. Irvin Fryer, Keith Byers, Keith Jackson, Mark Ingram, Tony Martin. I mean, the list goes. Mark Duper. The list goes on and on and on. The guys that that I walk into a locker room and I'm fighting for playing time with, and they were great, man. One of my favorite players of all time. A couple of them. One of them is Mike Williams, who people
yeah,
don't know a lot about, and another one, Scott Miller. Scott Miller taught me more about the Miami Dolphins and the offense and punt return than anybody ever did. And he knew I was there fighting. He was fighting for his job with me. We were competing for the same job. Punt return guy, fourth, fifth receiver, and he was incredible in how much he embraced me and helped me out, man. So yeah, it was very interesting walking in that locker room for the first time, especially being the number one pick for the team, where it's even more pressure on you.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, as time went on, you worked your way into the starting offense. You were, like I said, we talked about that punt. So little by little, you got involved. And as time went on, OJ, you became Marino's favorite receiver. I mean, whenever there was a big third down, he was always going to look for you. And that's the thing, too, sometimes, OJ, that I think people in the media sometimes they get too concerned with. They think sometimes more about how many touchdowns did this guy have in his career and stuff like that. But they don't realize the stuff that you yourself, Wayne Corbett, guys like that did to help the team, especially on third down plays where you were always right there catching a big catch.
Yeah, first of all, it was rough with me and Danny. Danny being a Pitt guy, me being a Penn State guy. He didn't want to throw me the damn ball, no, like at the beginning, man. I think that's what took so long, but the trust factor became so big, and he trusted me so much when it came to tough and critical situations, especially on third down. I was they called me a possession receiver, and I said, yeah, I was. I made sure we kept possession of the football by converting 70+% of my catches for first downs. So it was always important to be dependable in those situations. And Danny trusted me, and it's funny because we got some. I mean, actually, Jimmy Johnson said that Danny threw the ball to me too much. I said, "What do you mean? We led the league in receptions that year, and we score a lot of points by us getting it going down the field and keeping it going. And then guys like Aronde or Tony Martin, those guys can make some big plays for touchdowns, but." Yeah, man, it was a lot of fun. It really was a lot of fun. And the fact that I knew that, Danny looked at me coming out of that huddle, or he said, maybe OJ, even though I'm not primary, I better bust my butt and make sure I'm open because there's a good chance he's going to throw the ball to me.
Right. And one of the things too, OJ, that I just mentioned him a little earlier, but I loved watching Keith Byers. And I think about Keith Byers, he was a fullback who could make so many big catches. And then as time went on, I think they even converted him to a tight end because he was so durable and versatile. But I mean, talk about him a little bit because I always think of him as a guy who doesn't get enough love by the NFL because he was just a very underrated player who could do so many things.
Oh man, he's unbelievable. I'm gonna tell you this, and I was a huge fan of Keith Byers from growing up. He's a Buckeye, so I talked to him when I got in the locker room and saw Keith Byers. I was like, wow, that's Keith Byers right there. And I remember a game, I think it might have been in Illinois, where Keith Byers broke out a long run and lost his shoe. And I was reminded about seeing his sock flopping, as he was running this long touchdown with one shoe on, man, because he was that guy when it came to Ohio State Buckeyes. Completely underrated. Some of the best hands you've ever seen in football. Some of the biggest hands you've ever seen in football. But just an awesome, awesome guy, man. I love KB, man. He's still one of my favorite guys to this day. And playing on his team, playing with him was just truly, truly a blessing for me. Another guy that I grew up just loving was Bernie Kosar, who was on that roster in a couple of years, man. He was backing Danny up. Bernie was it's so funny. You're talking about me at Hawken. My senior year, I was the offensive player of the year for high school. Desmond Howard was the defensive player of the year for high school. And Bernie Kosar was the Browns player of the year in the same banquet, plain dealer banquet. So we're sitting on the dais by each other. I'm like, wow, this is pretty incredible. So yeah, KB and Bernie, man, my Ohio boys, Bernie's a Youngstown Boardman guy. Just a lot of love for those guys for sure.
Definitely. A memorable game your rookie year, OJ, it's one of my all-time favorite Dolphins wins was the snow game against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. And I mean, the Leon error led to Stoyanovich getting a second chance, and you guys win that game. And not many teams beat Dallas that year. They went on and ran away with the Super Bowl again. Talk about that Thanksgiving game, because what a game it was.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this earlier, right? Dallas was my team, and everybody watched them on Thanksgiving growing up. They were always that second game on Thanksgiving. Of course, Detroit Lions played the first game against whoever, and Dallas on the second game. And me and my cousin Brian, my cousin Brian Range, we used to get up and play like in the snow at our home. We go out there and play one-on-one football. It's snowing in Ohio, and we go out there and play the game to get ready for the Dallas Cowboy game to come on. So to be able to play in that game our rookie year on Thanksgiving against the Cowboys, sleet, it was nasty out there. So many big plays, I mean, Kevin Williams had the punt return. Keith Byers, who we talked about before, had the long run, did the snow angel in the end zone. And then, of course, the Leon Lett play, which is, everybody remembers that like it was yesterday. That was incredible. But you said it best, though. After that game, the Dolphins didn't win another game. We were 9-2 at that point, and the Cowboys didn't lose another game. They went on and won the Super Bowl after that, man. But that was just incredible. It was so much fun. And games like that, the best part about those games, Mike, is the flight home, man. It's such an enjoyable flight home, man, when you win a game like that in such fashion and, and the team coming together and everybody, doing a part, coming together on all three phases. That was a lot of fun.
Right, definitely was. And I wanted to ask you about Marino because I guess being a Dolphins fan, I get very sensitive when people bring this up when they say he never won the big one. I think that's so unfair because if you watch him throughout his career, he won so many big games that people forget because you got to get to the playoffs first. And he won so many big games in the regular season. And he had a great playoff record. I mean, listen, you guys ran into, especially the last few years, a great Buffalo dynasty. I mean, they could not be stopped. They had such great players. But I mean, sometimes I think that's what sometimes bothers me about the writers sometimes is they put too much emphasis into did this person win a big one. I know Peyton Manning took some heat over the years, Phillip Rivers, but I mean, you played with Dan Marino for so many years. You know how great he was. Just let me ask you, I mean, did you think sometimes that was unfair how they characterized him with that?
Oh, it's absolutely unfair. Look, I mean, come on, football is 33 guys, really. You think about it, man. Offense, defense, special teams. It's such a team sport that, you know, it's not like basketball where you can have two superstars and dominate and you can win championships. It's not like you're playing tennis or wrestling or golf where you're all by yourself. Danny, you know, if we had a great offense, we didn't have a good defense. We had a great defense, we didn't have a great offense. It was never the right situation. Look at John Elway's Super Bowls. I mean, he had a great run game and great defense, and that's his numbers in the Super Bowls weren't very good, but he still won them. So he's got 2 championships, but how much of a factor was he? Maybe during the regular season he did a lot of it, but in the game itself, it wasn't about him because he had a complimentary team. We never had the complimentary team to give Danny the help that he really, really needed, man. We really needed a run game at times. We really needed a defense at times, and we also needed teams at times, and we never had all those phases together working together, especially at the end. Our defense was great. Our offense was just okay. You know what I mean? So it was like, you know, the perfect situation for a great quarterback to not win a championship is what happened to Dan Marino.
Exactly. The 96 season comes to a close, OJ. Don Shula decides to retire, and the Dolphins bring in Jimmy Johnson. And I know it was bittersweet for me because I love Don. To me, when I think of the Dolphins, I mean, you always got to start with Don Shula because of what he did as a coach. And let me ask you, how hard was it for you? Because I know, like, bringing Jimmy in, you know, you're not going to lose a great coach. You're bringing in a great coach, but you do lose a guy that so many of you players looked up to and really performed under.
Yeah, I love Don Shula. That's my man right there, man. For one, to you know, give me the opportunity to shot at, you know, playing for the Miami Dolphins. You know, on draft day, that was the guy that called me. I talked to Don Shula, you know, that 25th pick overall and that 93 draft. It was Coach Shula that called me and asked me, you know, if I wanted to be a Miami Dolphin. I'm like, hell yeah. Who the hell doesn't want to be a Miami Dolphin? You know, so yeah, it was tough to see Coach go, and I didn't want him to go. And I didn't want Jimmy Johnson. I still don't want Jimmy Johnson. I'd still rather have Coach Shula as our head man. And Jimmy came in here with all this clout and stuff and still got nothing accomplished. So yeah, big mistake in my opinion by the Dolphins to let Shula go and hire Jimmy Johnson. And we're still regretting it to this day.
Let me ask you, do you think it didn't work out? Did you think maybe at this point Jimmy's heart wasn't completely in coaching anymore? Because I know he almost quit after the 98 season, and then he changed his mind and came back for one more year. But did you kind of sense that maybe he kind of regretted going there? Because it just seemed like his heart wasn't completely in it. And I could be wrong by that, but that's just the kind of vibe I got from it.
Yeah, I can't judge the man's heart. Man, I can judge his actions. It didn't seem like he was all in with us. It seemed like he got a nice payday though. And that worked out well for him. Look, I'm not going to get too much into Jimmy Johnson. I'm obviously not a fan of his. He's not a fan of mine. And that's just the way it is. But the situation was what it was when he was here. It wasn't very good for a lot of people, especially on the offensive side of football. He loved his defense, and he created an incredible defense. He really did. I mean, look at the Zacks and the JTs and those guys, and that's an amazing job. But what he did for our offense was criminal, in my opinion.
Right. But let's talk about 1998, OJ, because you kind of brought it up a little bit where you said Jimmy thought that Dan was throwing to you way too much. But 98, you have an unbelievable season. Never mind the 90 receptions. What a lot of people probably don't realize is you are one of only 2 players to have 90 receptions, 10 punt returns without 1 fumble. I mean, that's just amazing to me because you figure you're going to fumble at least once or twice in there. So talk about that 98 season. I know you didn't really enjoy playing for Jimmy, but on a personal level, to have that season with the great Dan Marino throwing you the ball, had to be very special for you.
It really was, man. We had a blast, man. And ball protection, especially in the punt return game, is critical. You know, your defense gets a stop. You cannot, as a punt returner, which I did. I think my first return as a rookie, put it on the ground against the Colts. And I got yelled at for that by Mike Westhoff and Don Shula, but I deserve that. You can't put the ball on the ground as a return guy. But I did, as the clip that we started with. In the second game against the Colts, I took that one back against them, so I got a little redemption in that situation. But ball protection is critical. It really is, man. I take pride in not putting the ball on the ground and not giving the defense an opportunity. For a short field most of the time. When you put the ball on the ground as an offense, it's usually giving the defense a short field. It's not usually going in. So I could just see like Joe Paterno yelling at me if I dropped it. I could see Coach Walton yelling, even though neither one of those guys cursed, but they got their point across without, using 4-letter words. It was just fun. And what's funny about the 90 receptions that year was through 8 games, you remember he had 16 games scheduled. Through 8 games, I only had 30. So I had 60 the last 8. So it was like me and Danny went on a tear the last half of the season.
Right. And if you think about it, OJ, 3 receivers that Dan Marino really threw the ball to more than anybody were Mark Clayton, Mark Duper, and yourself. So you're on a nice list of 3 of his favorite receivers to throw to. And that's got to make you feel good, because I was thinking about this too, OJ. In the time where Marino was like coming on the scene, that 84 season with the 48 touchdown passes, you're just a kid in high school. You're never thinking, oh, I'm going to play with Dan Marino. So you look back on it and you think about it from a kid who played at a small high school, and to see that you were one of Dan Marino's favorite targets, it's got to come full circle for you, and you got to be proud of that.
Yeah, man, it really is fun, man. And it's so funny now though, because the older I get, the more people forget about those things, And it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that, man, because it is such an honor to to be mentioned with those guys, and the great Nat Moore, and the great Paul Warfield. Paul Warfield is probably the greatest, and you probably got Duper and Clayton, however you want to mix those up, and then Nat's the man, and then to be pretty much right now whatever most people think is the top 5 receiver in Dolphin history, that's super special, man. I mean, it really is, and you say that about Danny, and that'll never change, because Danny won't come back on the field, and nobody else is going to come back on the field. So I'll always be one of Danny's top 3 receivers, in the history of the game. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool feeling.
Right. It was very hard for me as a Dolphins fan to see Dan go after the 99 season. But I will say this, and again, this guy took a lot of criticism. I don't think he deserved it, was Jay Fiedler. And he came in 2000 and did a tremendous job. He's replacing a legend. And now you got a new coach in Dave Wannstedt. And I just thought that 2000 team, OJ, overachieved so much. I mean, they won the division, won 11 games, did so well. And I mean, talk about that 2000 season, because I really felt like Fiedler did an unbelievable job, considering he had to replace the great one.
Yeah, I love Jay. Jay's so good and so smart, man. You talk about a guy, a Dartmouth kid that, playing big time football, in the NFL. And, remember Jay torched us a little bit in the year before in the Jacksonville game as the backup to Mark Brunell. So we had to get him on our team, man. And what a competitor, man. I mean, people don't realize what an athlete that Jay Fiedler was. I mean, I think he was a decathlete. That was unbelievable. Could do a little bit of everything. And his leadership and his smarts and his toughness were unmatched by pretty much anybody I've ever played with, man. So Jay did a hell of a job. We had a hell of a running game, and we had a hell of a defense, which is a perfect situation to go and win championships, man. And I think that team might have underachieved as well. I mean, I look at the 93 team with all the, the good players on that one, that underachieved. Because they just came off the AFC Championship game the year before they lost to Buffalo. I think maybe 95 team was probably an underachieving team. And that 2000 team I thought was built to win championships, and just didn't happen for us.
Right. So your career comes to a close, OJ. You had some nagging injuries, and that's what I wanted to ask you too. I mean, how difficult is it to put receivers? A lot of fun, but it's difficult too, because your career can be cut short, because, I mean, think about it. You're running full speed. You got a defensive back running full speed at you. I mean, look at Wayne Corbett. I mean, whenever I hear him talk, I feel so bad, because it sounds like he's had lingering headaches for years. And I know you had some issues as well. How hard is it to play in the NFL and to play wide receiver? Because, I mean, your career isn't for longevity.
Right. Well, it's a lot easier now, I think, for these
Yeah.
guys now. You know, they can't get touched, they can't get hit. You know, the fenceless receiver was never a point of emphasis when I was playing. You know, the illegal contact was never called as much, you know, when I played as it is now. And guys can hold the hell out of you if they wanted to for as long as they wanted to, even though it wasn't legal, they still got away with it. It was tough, man. But you know what? Tough is what makes us good. You know, that's what I love. I love going out there, and I love getting into a battle every single game, studying my opponent all week, and then going out there and being able to and execute. I was never the biggest, strongest, fastest guy against whoever I was playing against, but I try to beat them with smarts and quickness and toughness, and I think that's the key. And a lot of times, man, these guys, you know, are good. They're fast. They're quick, but some of them lack toughness. Toughness is part of football. If you're not tough, you can't play this sport.
And let me ask you this. Do you think, like, there was big controversy last night with the roughing the quarterback, and then, of course, a lot of people were annoyed with the Buccaneer game the other day. They feel like Tom Brady got away with. They called it roughing the passer, and it really wasn't. Do you think the officials are getting too carried away now with some of the penalties they call?
Yeah, well, you know what, man? They work for the league, man. The league wants it that way. I feel bad for the officials, especially as fast as the game is. They're doing this in real time, you know, and they're making these calls in real time. Of course, we can look back at replay after replay and slow mo. Bad call last night. I thought the roughing on Tom Brady was the same play that happened to Tua that didn't get called. You know,
Yeah.
so it's like, I mean, it's a tough situation for these officials, man. But the league is the one that's really flailing, in my opinion, trying to figure out some of these rules, man. Look, they throw a rule in about the concussion and who's the first team to get stung by is the Miami Dolphins. You know, when Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt in the first game, first play of the last game. But I'm all for player safety. But man, oh man, I think there's some of those plays, especially that play last night, should be a reviewable play. You got a guy that not only took the ball from the quarterback, braced himself with his left hand, and you know, kind of recovered it. You got to look at that and be like, all right, we were wrong about that play. You know, you got to be able to pick that flag up and give the ball to Kansas City and go the other way. They're doing the best they can, but the game is so super fast, and they're trying to be so super safe for the guys that it's a tough deal for those guys.
Right. So as time went on, OJ, you became part of the media, and you kind of were doing sports talk radio before there were so many sports stations. And I think you did 790 The Ticket with Sid Rosenberg. And what I remember about that, OJ, is you and Sid covered the story of Stan Van Gundy resigning as the Heat coach and Pat Riley returning to the Heat. That was a big story. So just talk to me a little bit about your broadcasting career, your radio career, because I mean, do you appreciate what the media has to do sometimes now that you've been a part of the media for over 15 years?
I do. You know, I know how tough it is. The radio grind, I didn't enjoy it at all, man, because, you know, 4 hours a day on the radio was tough stuff a lot of times, especially, you know, when there's not much to talk about. And then
Yeah.
you got to be critical of the teams that you love, and you got to be fair. Those are tough. Those are tough things for me. I'm a homer. That's why it's hard for me. When I got on the radio, they told me to stop saying us and we when I was referring to the Dolphins, you know. I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. Now I do work for the team, so I can say as many us's and we's as I want to. But I do appreciate what those guys do. But see, nowadays though, it seems like more guys, maybe a little bit back then, or try to be the first ones to get the story out instead of getting the story right. And that bothers me more than anything, man. Make sure everything's correct before you know, go to Twitter. They want to be the first one to tweet it out, and then they want to retract it when they're wrong about something, man. So I didn't like that part of the whole game at all. It was good to see how it works over there on that side of the table, you know, as an athlete, because, you know, in the locker room, there were a few times I didn't want to talk to the media at all because, you know, they the things they write or is to get readers. It's not about trying to put out fun stuff or what guys are doing in the community. They're looking at bad stuff so they can get listeners or readers. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that part I didn't enjoy about that side of the table.
Right. A podcast I really enjoy, OJ, is The Fish Tank. And you've done a tremendous job with that. Talk about doing that. And I mean, do you enjoy doing podcasts? Because you don't have to, it's different than being on 4 hours of talk radio. Are you enjoying that a lot more than doing radio per se?
Man, I love podcasting. I really do. And it's like podcasting is, it's we record whenever we want to. It's not like you have
Yeah.
to be there from, 10 to 2, from the AM to the PM like I had to do with the radio station. And also what we do is, our podcasting is not X and O's, but it's more like, talking to guys about life and, some incredible plays they might have made as Dolphins, but what they're doing with their lives now. Just fun anecdotes, stories that we've heard that from them being pranksters or getting pranked or getting punked or whatever like that. So it's so much fun because that's what we do most of the time, Mike, when we're hanging out anyway. So then we tell stories. It's not about a play, not like,
Yeah.
I remember the catch I had against Buffalo. It's never like that. It's remember we was at the hotel and somebody, turned the fire sprinklers on. Those are the fun stuff that we enjoy talking about. And that's how we handle the Fish Tank podcast with my incredible co-host, Seth Levitt, who came up with the idea. Man, he's so brilliant when it comes to the writing of what we do, the questioning of what we do, moving our podcast forward. And it's just fun to work with him, man. He's incredible.
The thing I love about so many athletes nowadays, OJ, former athletes, I should say, is they give back to the community a lot. And one of the things you started was the Catch 81 Foundation, which is just a wonderful thing that you've created. Talk about that and what that's about.
Yeah, so it goes back to Penn State. We did a lot of charity work at Penn State. Joe always wanted us to do a lot of work in the community. We were there all summer long anyway, so we did a lot of things there where we go out and hang out with the kids and go to picnics and barbecues and play, kickball and things like that, just to give back to the community and give kids, I guess, something to look up to. And then my mom, we started doing a golf tournament a long time ago, and my mom always said that, we've been given so much that it's imperative that we give something back. And so that's when we started our foundation. We were doing the event originally, and with in conjunction with CF or the American Heart Association. But then we decided to do Catch 81 Foundation because we wanted to start working with charities that were near and dear to our heart. Single parent homes, like I grew up with just my mom, underprivileged kids, like I grew up working with kids that are in the city, things like that. So that's why Catch 81 Foundation came about and why it's still important to me to this day.
I think that's awesome, OJ. I really do think that's a great thing you're doing. December 29th, 2013 was a special day for Dolphins fans, and I know it was very special for you. You were inducted into the Miami Dolphins Walk of Fame. Talk about that a little bit and what that meant for you, that moment.
Yeah, they can. They're not gonna put me in the air in the ring of honor, so they're gonna put me on the ground. So I'll take whatever, man. A few people, that have had the honor, no matter what, to be honored by the Dolphins. Look, the Dolphins have had thousands and thousands of guys, wear that aqua and orange, man, and be honored to be, one of the 20 plus that are in the Walk of Fame. It's incredible. It really is, man. It just really, honestly, just tells you how they feel about you as a person, for one, but as an athlete for the team for two, man. And I mean, that ceremony was great. It's, I lost my mom right after that. And so it was just an honor that, she was able to make that ceremony and see me receive that honor. And then, and it's going to be there forever. Even when I'm gone, my kids will be able to go and see that me in the Walk of Fame and so on and so forth, man. So it's a true honor, true blessing to be able to, for one, to be a Dolphin that long, and for two, to be able to, put up numbers enough and do enough in the community to get that honor.
And not many could say, OJ, they played with one team their entire career. You can, and thank God. I mean, it broke my heart when Clayton left. I was so upset over that. So for you to play your whole career with the Dolphins, that had to be special for you as well.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I had a couple of chances at free agency, but the Dolphins never let me get there, which I love. I wasn't going to go anywhere. I might have played hardball negotiations, but I was going to end up coming back to Miami. Who wants to go anywhere else, man? I live where people vacation.
Yeah.
It's paradise down here, man. So yeah, I mean, once I got down here, and like I said, we played 2 bowl games down here. My last bowl game was down here, so it was really, really strange that I played a bowl game against Stanford in January. Worked out, combine, went to Japan, draft day comes, and I get drafted by the Dolphins. I'm coming back to Miami, man. It's just a blessing. So yeah, one team my whole career. I love it. I love it.
How do you like the current Miami Dolphins? Because the last few years they've been kind of knocking on the door. I mean, I could think of last year. I think they were 2-8 at one point, and they just came on a tear. Finished 9-8. Tua, if he could stay healthy, which I don't know if he's gonna be, but he is very exciting to watch. I mean, how do you like this current Dolphins team?
I love this squad. I really do, man. Unfortunately, we've been banged up, man. Our tops, and not just banged up. Top players are banged up on our team, man. I love Mike McDaniel and what he brings to the table. It's going to be interesting to see how his career progresses as the head man here, and it's going to be a long one, man, because he's going to be that good, and our team is going to be that solid and that good. Tough couple breaks, couple weeks we've had recently, but when you run into injuries, no excuses. Every team has injuries. You're going to run into some adversity. And so we'll see how they respond. But this team is so much fun to watch. The speed on the team, the creativity from our head man, how he gets along with these guys as, on the same level of thinking and so current with his thinking is just unbelievable to me. And the kids, I call them kids because they're all half my age, but they're all buying in on it. And I think it's going to be a really, really good thing for our organization moving forward.
Right. Let me ask you this, OJ, before we go. It's hard to put one thing into place when you've had so many outstanding moments in your career, but what is the one thing, the most rewarding thing that football gave to you as not just a player, but an individual?
Well, I tell you what, it gave me an opportunity to, what it does is it really gives you an opportunity to go out and be able to give back. Obviously, you have the fortune and the fame at times in your life. We obviously we didn't make as much money as you guys make now, but it does though is it gives you an opportunity to go out in the community and people recognize you and you're able to give back and draw from people to donate or come to your events. We have a few different events. We have the Signature Grand Ghoul, which is a Halloween party that's coming up. With Broward Health System, we're doing that with. We have our bowling event. We have our toy drive. We have things like that are just incredible. And the fact that I was playing for the Miami Dolphins gives me these opportunities to go out and do that and be able to give back to an incredible community that's been so good to me. So not just the fortune and fame, but the opportunity to be able to give back because you become recognized for being a Miami Dolphin.
Oh, that's awesome. And OJ, I want to thank you for coming on today. Number one, you're a stand-up person and a class act and one of my favorite athletes of all time. I mean, I've said this many times. My top 5 Dolphins in no particular order are Marino, Clayton, Duper, Reggie Roby, and of course yourself. And
Reggie Roby, I like that Reggie Roby, man. I wish we'd have talked about him a little bit. That's my dude right there, man.
Well, let me tell you a quick story since you're still here. I'll tell you how I became a Miami Dolphins fan. I was a kid, and the NFL players played in a charity basketball game in New Haven, Connecticut. So they're signing autographs.
You're from New Haven?
I'm from Connecticut. I'm from Derby, Connecticut. But they're signing autographs at halftime. Now, at this point, I think I was 8 or 9 years old, so I was a Giants fan, and I really wanted Lawrence Taylor's autograph. Well, he signed in a bunch, and I think maybe I was the 4th person in line, and he tells us, I'm not signing anymore. And I'm begging him. I'm like, please, Mr. Taylor. And he's like, nope, I'm not signing anymore. Well, Reggie Roby saw that I was upset, and he said, come here, son, I'll sign for you. So he signed the autograph for me, and my father told me, that's Reggie Roby. And I said, who is that? And he said, he's a punter for the Miami Dolphins. And I just said, well, you know what? That's my team now.
That is so awesome, man. That is an incredible story, man. I love that, man.
Yeah, and that's how I became a Dolphins fan. So many people might think it's Dan Marino, and I love Marino, but what Reggie Roby did that day, I'll never forget, because that told me he saw the disappointment and he was going to make me happy by signing that autograph. And I love Reggie. Just a tremendous guy.
Yeah, Mike, you're probably one of the few people that have Reggie Roby in their Mount Rushmore of Dolphins, man. That's awesome, bro. I love that, man. That's an incredible story, man. He was definitely an incredible man.
Yeah, definitely was. Well, OJ, thank you again for coming on. I love what you're doing in your everyday life. I think it's great. And thank you for giving me, as a Miami Dolphins fan, so many great memories. And I really do appreciate you coming on.
Man, I appreciate you having me, man. Great interview, man. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you, OJ. And of course, folks, that was OJ McDuffie. I'm Mike Kenichi. This was In the Spotlight saying good night, everyone.